what I'd like to spend the next 10 minutes talking to you about is the question around whether you've actually incurred extra expenses because you're working from home due to the result of COVID-19. And most of us obviously are working from home and incurring those extra expenses. And it's really difficult at a time like this to know what we should do in terms of tax. We're all incredibly overwhelmed. So tax is an area I talk about quite a lot. Now, 70% of people do use a tax agent. So what I'm going to tell you today may simply be information that you go to your tax agent with. And nearly 80% of people receive a tax refund. So again, the information that I'm going to give you today hopefully leads to a larger tax refund for you. And what I'm going to do is run through some really simple tips for making sure you get a tax deduction for the expenses that you're currently incurring because you're working from home. And it certainly is one of the pitfalls or risks in online teaching, that we're spending so much more time using our own resources. And there's lots of challenges in terms of documentation, etc. So I'm just going to give you some really simple tips to hopefully make your life easier, and come 30th of June, end up with a bit more money in the bank account. Now, a lot of the information I'm going to talk to you about is also available through the ATO website, and they have some great fact sheets that you can have a look at. And like I said, if you lodge to a tax agent, they will have all this information as well. But even just a few of these tips allowing you to be prepared will save you some money come the time to go to your tax agent. So the first thing we're going to have a look at is sorry, my screen is madly flashing up, is what you can claim as extra expenses during tax time. And there's four things you really need to think about. The first is the criteria for claiming. So what kind of criteria do you actually have to meet to be able to claim? Secondly, what expenses can you actually claim? And if you can claim them, how do you actually calculate that claim? And it's not as simple as simply thinking about how much money you've spent. And finally, the issue around proving your claim. Now, if there's one message I can deliver to you today, is to make sure you keep records. And it's not as difficult as it sounds, because what you'll discover over the next couple of minutes is simply keeping a diary of the hours that you're spending working at home, whether that's in front of your computer, reading notes, teaching, etc., all counts towards your deduction. And one really simple thing you can do is just to keep a record of the hours that you are working. Lots of reasons for doing that beyond tax, but tax is a great one you'll discover as well, to get a minimum claim at least. Now, if you want to keep actual records, the ATO has a great app for keeping track of your expenses as well that you can use. So moving on to that first area of criteria for claiming. The first thing that you need to realize is you do actually have to have spent the money. Now, that sounds pretty obvious, but what that means is that you can't just be using something that's been sitting around the home for the last 10 years. So you have a spare monitor, you pull it out and you say, well, I'm using it now, so it would have cost me $250. I'm going to claim it as a tax deduction. It doesn't work like that. You need to have actually spent the money, and spent the money in the relevant income tax year, which would be the 2019-20 income tax year. You couldn't be reimbursed for the money, so you're not actually out of pocket. If you've been reimbursed, you can't claim it. Or it couldn't be a gift, so the neighbour gives you the spare computer or something like that, you're not going to be able to claim it. Secondly, the expense must directly relate to earning income. So this means that, you know, if you've upped your broadband, you're spending more on internet to watch Netflix, you can't claim it all. It's not directly related to earning income. It's only that which relates to income producing purposes that you get to claim. Thirdly, you have to look at whether you have the records to prove your expenses. And that's what I said. A simple diary note on the hours is actually going to get you a deduction. What can you claim? More importantly, what can't you claim? And I'm going to look at that on the next slide. The things you can claim Your electricity expenses, part of that relates to work, cleaning costs for a dedicated work area, phone and internet expenses, and that's going to be a huge one for a lot of us. Computer consumables, I don't know about everyone else, but I had to go out and buy extra paper, ink, etc. from working at home. And then, of course, our home office equipment. And that includes everything like your computers, your printers, the phone, your mobile phone that you're using, the furniture, etc. Now, a really handy little tip here is if you are buying equipment and you want an immediate deduction for it, and it's purely for work purposes, keep your expenditure under $300. So if you go and buy an extra monitor for $295, that becomes an immediate deduction. If you spend $305, you're going to have to depreciate that. And that means you're going to have to spread the cost out over 4 years. Depreciation for computer equipment is 4 years. Laptops, 2 years. Not so difficult because you can accelerate the depreciation. So laptops, pretty much you get a full depreciation up front. But just have a think about the kind of things you're buying. If you bought an extra printer, maybe monitor, etc., it's great if you can get the full tax deduction by keeping it under that $300 limit. What can't you claim? The tax office has specifically come out and said to people who are working at home during this COVID-19 period that you cannot claim your occupancy expenses. So there's things like a percentage of your mortgage interest, a percentage of your rent, a percentage of your rates, insurance, etc. They're expenses that you can only claim if you're running a business from home. And if you're an academic, you won't be doing that. You won't meet the criteria. So you can't claim those expenses, even if the office space takes up 10% of your apartment. You can't claim 10% of your rent as a deduction. Nor can you claim the cost of things like coffee, tea, milk, and other general household items, your tissues, your toilet paper, etc. We're all going through a lot more of that stuff. Normally, those kind of things are provided at work, but you still cannot get a deduction for them. So the next thing we need to think about is how we calculate our claim. And this is where people get really nervous. Now, what has happened due to our current situation is the ATO has come out and given us a shortcut method. And this is where keeping a diary will actually get some money back in your pocket, because the commissioner has said you can calculate a claim and get a deduction for 80 cents per hour for every hour you're working at home. Now, that covers all your expenses. So you don't need to keep any other records. It covers everything from your electricity, your cleaning expenses, your phone costs, your computer costs, etc. And that's going to apply from the 1st of March this year through until the 30th of June. So if you do use that method, all you need is your diary, covers everything, so you can't claim any additional costs. Only currently available, it may be extended into next year. And all you need to do in your tax return is include a note, COVID hourly rate claim. It's as simple as that. So just keep a record of your hours. And if there's nothing else you take away from today, please take away that. Everyone can get a claim and some money back because we're all working at home. Method 2 is one of the traditional methods that you've always been able to use. And if you want to claim a bit more, you have some other expenses, this may be worth considering because you get 52 cents per hour, and then you don't have to record heating, cooling, lighting, etc., decline in value of the furniture, and then you actually get a separate claim for your phone and internet expenses, you can computer consumables, and decline in value of all your other equipment. Now, the catch with using this method is that you do need a dedicated work area. Otherwise, you must calculate actual expenses. And the idea is you can't be sitting in your living room using electricity while the family's watching Netflix. You don't get the 52 cents an hour then. But most of us have dedicated work areas as well. The ATO no longer specifies an office, they just say a work area. Third method is actual expenses. So keep a record of actual hours, and then you work out the percentage of your electricity bill, etc., for absolutely everything, but you must have receipts. And this is where it becomes a lot more complex. So if you've got a lot of expenses, absolutely, ATO app is worth using, and keep a track of that. Finally, how do we prove our claim? That's completely separate to having the right to have a claim. You need to think about how you prove the claim. Keep a diary, as I've said. Keep a receipt of your assets purchased during this time. However, keep in mind that small expenses of $10 or less and totaling no more than $200 can be claimed. So things like you go to the post office and buy some paper that's about $5 a ream. Just make a diary note of that, and you can claim it if you lose the receipt. And obviously keep itemized phone bills and internet bills. Now, is it worth doing? Final slide. Well, I've got an example here of Sally, who is required to work at home. Her taxable income is $80,000. So that puts her in the 32.5% tax bracket plus 2% Medicare levy. Now, she's hopeless at keeping receipts, like a lot of us, and thinks it isn't worth it. But she finds out that, you know, through her diary, she's worked 30 hours at home each week between the 1st of March and 30th of June. And I've rounded that to 17 weeks approximately. She uses the shortcut method. In about 30 seconds, she discovers that she can claim a deduction of $408. That is going to result in a tax savings because of her income tax bracket of $141. So just by keeping that diary, she ends up with $141 back. Now, that depends on your tax bracket. If you want to work out the figures, someone earning around $30,000 with the same numbers would save $86. Someone's earning over $180,000, say they're working 50 hours a week from home, they would end up with a refund of $320 because of what they're claiming. So it's a really quick run through of some of the little tips and tricks you can use when it comes to tax time that get some money back in your pocket, because we are all incurring extra expenses without a lot of effort. Thank you.